All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to adding and subtracting fractions. Now, again, whenever students hear fractions, sometimes they freak out, and it's really just the addition subtraction part. The multiplying and dividing, a little bit easier. So, reviewing our integer rules, again, we're going to be dealing with the addition subtraction. So again, same sign, we're going to add them and take that sign. 3 plus 7 is 10. Negative 3 plus negative 4, really 3 plus 4 is 7. Take the same sign. Different sign, difference, subtraction. So obviously you're going to subtract the two numbers and take the sign from the largest absolute value, the bigger number. Don't say that though. Largest absolute value. Now there's a few that you're going to see again that you need to do practicing adding the opposite. So when you see your subtraction sign, you're going to change it to addition, and then the second number becomes the opposite. So, don't freak out. We can do it. Now, the reason that fractions might be a little bit more difficult for students is because you do need that extra step of your common denominator. So let's start off with a 5 and 10 for our denominator. Now, not only is it a common, but it's the least common denominator. Because some students learn, well, just 5 times 10 is 50. So they get that and then continue to work. And that's actually one strategy that I taught my daughter when she was younger. But then as we get more advanced, we talk about, well, what work can be made just a little bit easier? And then we talk about, well, a 5 can really change into a 10. So that means that the LCD would simply be a 10. The good news about that is the only one that has to change is your first fraction. So the 3 over 10 can obviously stay the same. So then we ask ourselves, well, how does a 5 change into that 10 that we need? Well, basic multiplication, right? 5 times 2 is 10. That gives me the LCD that I desire, but I got to do the exact same thing for my numerator. So 3 times 2 gives me a 6. So now that I have my problem here, I am allowed to do my addition or subtraction. Now, when it's presented to you like this, some students may say, well, Mr. Murillo, it's a little bit easier if I keep it in subtraction, and I totally understand that because it's just 6 subtract 3. But again, the strategy would be to change this to the opposite sign, which is addition, and this to the opposite, which is a negative 3. Now, one thing that students forget about, 10 subtract 10 for our denominator, we don't write 0. We just keep it as a 10 because it's really 6 tenths subtract 3 tenths. 6 subtract 3, 3 tenths. Now I cannot reduce this. I need to leave it as 3 tenths. And again, in 8th grade, we're going to go ahead and practice our fraction answers. So I'm not going to ask you to change it to a decimal as of now. 3 tenths is perfectly fine. So again, remember, in order to add or subtract, we have to find that least common denominator first. And that'll really help us out as we progress into more advanced problems. All right, so let's try this again. Circle there. Got a simple addition sign, positive answer then. LCD, what is my least common denominator going to be? Remember, you don't have to just do 4 times 6 and say 24, because again, that's a common denominator, but it's not a least common denominator. Some of you might be thinking, 12. Now, unfortunately, that means we do have to change both fractions. Now, if I want a denominator of 12 for both of them, I have to change both fractions. So how does a 4 change into a 12? Yeah, just got to multiply by 3. 9 multiplied by 3. So remember, they are going to multiply by the same value there. So 9 times 3 is 27. And then we have 6 change into a 12. We're going to multiply by 2. And 5 times 2 is 10. Now that we have it in the same denominator, we're going to go ahead and use our addition skills. So again, remember, it is just a positive answer. 27 plus 10 is 37. Now, I cannot reduce that. 37, prime number, cannot divide with the 12, a 2, a 4, a 6, a 3, anything like that. So I'm going to leave it as 37 over 12. If I wanted to, we could put it into a mixed number, but we're going to leave it as is for 37 over 12. But for those of you who are interested, what is that going to be? How many times does 12 go into 37? And then what's left over? Well, isn't 12 times 3 36? And 36 is really close to 37. So the mixed number, not required, you don't have to write it down, is going to be 3 whole. And what do I got to put there to get to my 37? Remember, 12 times 3 is 36. Add 1 gives me my 37. Excellent. Ooh, okay, yeah, I see here. Let's circle. Going to give you a moment to think about it. Now, most students on their work here, they would just see, double negative. But I want you to go ahead and practice it in thinking of adding the opposite. So, addition sign for adding. The opposite of negative 1/2 is positive 1/2. Well, negative times negative is positive, yes, but adding the opposite might be a little bit more helpful if you do it that way. Okay, so we've cleaned that up. Now we can go ahead and think about our LCD. Our LCD, again, for a 3 and a 2. Well, this time, yeah, just 3 times 2 is 6. So that did work for them. Unfortunately, that means we do need to change both, but that's okay. All right, I'm going to grab my second color. I'm going to actually give you a small head start. Think about what you need to put here. Then what you need to put here. Our goal again is to have them the same denominator, the LCD, least common denominator, so that I can add them and proceed from there. Well, 3 times 2 is the 6 that we desire, so 4 times 2 is 8. 2 times 3 is 6. 1 times 3 is 3. All right, I can do my addition now. LCD is 6. 8 plus 3 is 11. And again, in 8th grade, we are good with that. But let's say, hypothetical again, it was a word problem and we did want the mixed number. Not required right now, but it might be later on. What is going to be? How many times does 6 go into 11? Well, it's definitely not 2, right? Because 6 times 2 is 12, and I only have 11 there. So it's going to be 1 and something sixth. So if you were thinking about it again, the mixed number, 6 times 1 is 6, but I want an 11, so that's got to be a 5. But remember, we're focused on the 11 over 6. That's just a little side work, refresher from 7th grade. Hey, all right, we got some negatives finally. I've got a negative plus a negative, same sign, so right away I know my answer is negative. So on a multiple choice test again, I would go ahead and identify the negative answers, cross off any positive answers. So let's identify the least common denominator and proceed there. Well, those are both primes, 5 and 7, so the LCD just has to be 35. Now, when I have negative fractions like this, I really prefer to have the negative sign at the top. That's my preference. Now, the reason I do that is because when sometimes students write it and they put their negative sign so close, sometimes it even looks like it's just a fraction line. So to prevent that issue, I have myself, and I encourage my students actually to put it at the numerator. And we're going to add second fraction, LCD of 35, but remember, we're going to put the negative sign at the numerator. All right, going to give you a small moment to go ahead and, again, try and figure out what's going to go inside these little parentheses. Some of you might be saying, I already got the answer, Mr. Murillo. And I say, cheater, because you probably just looked at the bottom. Just kidding. Some of you are really quick, again, on these quick ideas of review. Well, it's just sevens, right? 5 times 7 is 35. 1 times 7 is 7. Keep the negative sign. Over here, 7 times 5 is 35. So 3 times 5 is 15. Keep the negative sign. All right, rule is, again, a negative plus a negative stays a negative answer. But we already talked about that on a multiple choice test or quiz. Again, you have already eliminated any positive answers. So we're really just trying to figure out what the numerator is going to be. Now, if you notice here again, if you'd like to, you could technically use a number line, but I'm not too sure if you want to move 15 spaces. So the rule, remember, is just add them up. 15 plus 7. If you have to, no shame. Go over here to the side. 15 plus 7. Add it up. If you can do it in your head, great. You've got negative 22 over 35. Now, if you do your least common denominator correctly, especially on like this problem, number 5, you do not have to do, man, I forgot to circle it again. You don't have to do any reducing. Let me say that again. If you choose your least common denominator correctly, you should not have to do any reducing. So your answer, negative 22 over 35, should be good to go. All right, I think this is our last one. No, we got 2 more. Ah, silly. But again, trying to get some advanced work here. Now, there's a few different strategies on what you could do on this problem here. Since they're both positive, you could really just ignore that 9 for right now if you want to. Some students, though, like changing it to an improper fraction. So there's several different ways to complete this problem because they are both positive. So let's try this strategy first. Let's ignore the 9, and let's just work with the 7/8 and the 2/3. So what's my LCD for the 8 and the 3? Well, it'd just be 24, right? Let's see here. Again, I'm not worried about this 9 yet. So if you want to, you can temporarily cover it up. I just can't forget about it. All right, so come back to that 9. All right, well, it's just a simple swap, right? So 8 times 3, 7 times 3, and that will give us our denominator, or LCD, of 24. And over here, 3 times 8, 2 times 8. All right, so 8 times 3 is 24, 7 times 3 is 21. 3 times 8 is 24, 2 times 8 is 16. So when I add these up, let's see, the 24s stay the same. 21 plus 16 is 37. Now, normally, I would just leave it like that, right? A nice improper fraction answer. But if we remember, I really had this 9 here. And I can't forget about it. So I'm going to go ahead and bring it down. So I really have this, 9 and 37 over 24. Now, that doesn't really make any sense, right? So this is actually one of the skills that I teach my own kids at home. So it really means 9 plus, well, 24 goes into 37 just one time. So really, I'm taking the 37 over 24, kind of like we talked about on the previous part, and go ahead and change that into a mixed number. So that's going to be a 24 here. So what's that numerator going to be? 24 times 1 is 24, but I got to get to 37, so isn't that going to be a 13? So my answer would be 10 and 13 over 24. So if I wanted to have a improper fraction answer, remember, we got to be able to go back and forth now that you're in 8th grade. Isn't it just 24 times 10, add 13? So 24 times 10 is 240, add 13 is 253. So look at the bottom of your worksheet and see which answer is preferred. Now, normally we would say an improper fraction answer, but sometimes a mixed number is better. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because really we gave you a mixed number right here for part of the problem. Again, if you didn't like that strategy, you could change this into an improper fraction, but I really think you're going to be dealing with a lot bigger numbers that way. So I like this one as well. All right, last one. Let's see here. Adding the opposite, so I can do that right now. Don't worry about that. LCD, 3 times 5, because they're just prime. LCD is going to be 15. So again, I'm not going to stress about the whole numbers right now. I'm going to go ahead and work with the fraction parts and then proceed there. The other strategy is changing them into improper fractions, working from there. So they both have their strategies. All right, so if I'd like to, again, I could technically cover those up, but don't forget about them. I'll come back to them, promise. All right, so we said LCD is 15. Now, this is nice positive, so I don't have to worry too much about my whole numbers as of now. If they were one positive, one negative, then yeah, I got to be a little bit more careful. All right, so let's see here. So just another swap. 8 times 5 is 40. 5 times 3, 15. 2 times 3 is 6. Looks pretty good, right? Because it's addition sign right there. So that means I can, since it's addition, I could say it's going to be 15. 40 plus 6 is 46. Now again, if it was a subtraction problem, it'd be a different strategy. All right, what are those numbers again? Let's see here. A 5 and a 9. So we got a 5 and a 9. So since it is addition, 5 plus 9, that is 14. Again, addition, I can do it this way. So how many times does 15 go into 46? It's more than 1, right? So we got to figure out the whole number and our fraction piece. So 15 times 1 is 15. 15 times 2 is 30, getting closer. 15 times 3 is 45, and I want 46, so it means I got a 1 there. So when I add it together, 14 plus 3 is 17, and 1/15. Nice. Now, let's say, hypothetical, it was subtraction. What I would probably do in that instance is I would not do this strategy. So let me give you that extra one. So remember, if you need to, you could always back it up. So let's say it was subtraction. But it's not really subtraction. But if it was. Now, we still have the same LCD of 15, but I wouldn't do that yet. What I would probably do instead is change these into improper fraction, like I said. So 3 times 5 is 15, plus 8 is 23. So that'd be 23 over 3. Over here, 5 times 9 is 45, add 2 is 47. 47 over 5. Then I would proceed to do the LCD. And then continue from there. Because again, if it was a subtraction problem, I couldn't do all those little pieces like I did previous strategy because those were all positives, addition. Again, if you want to see the completion of this, that's going to be a 5, and of course a 3, and that would give us our LCD of 15. And then you would just do multiplication. 23 times 5, or 20 times 5 is 100. 3 times 5 is 15, so that's going to be 115. And if you didn't know that, again, you could just go to the side. 23 times 5. Over here, 47 times 3. 3 times 7 is 21. 12, 14. You could add them together. That'll give you your improper fraction. And then if you need to, you could change it to the mixed number like I had on the previous strategy. But again, got to be really careful with your signs. Got to be really careful with your least common denominator. Again, LCD, you've heard about that before. All right, so for quick review, sorry, this one was a little bit longer. Again, we did adding, subtracting fractions, and in doing so, we also talked about our signs. So be careful with those signs. All right, continue on and completing your assignment. Be awesome.